What is the difference between Canada and the US? These two countries share a big border, but also a lot of cultural similarities. I've lived in both Canada, I've lived in the US, and in this video, we're gonna talk about the pros and cons of Canada and the US. And hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tero. I am a Finnish mushroom entrepreneur, and this is my YouTube channel, The Spore, where I talk about things that I've learned in life about living in 10 different countries, or building businesses, or health and wellness. That is kind of where I've worked my whole life. And one of the things that I've covered a lot in the channel and gained a lot of popularity is cultural differences between Europe and the US. I've lived almost a decade in the US. I'm married to an American. We have 3 beautiful kids, but I've also lived in 5 countries in Europe, and I've built businesses in both. So work and parenting and cultural differences between the 2 regions. But funny enough, I've also lived in Canada. The first country I ever moved out, when I moved away from Finland, I moved to Canada and I worked there in a university. And now I've spent more time here in the US, and I always looked at those countries as very similar. I just thought they were the same. They had the same movies, the same music, this more or less the same fashion. But after living and working there, I realized there's also pretty stark differences. And in this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of US versus Canada. Now I felt that it was a little fake that I would be talking about this experience alone, so I invited my good friend and now business partner, Miki Agrawal, who's this amazing, successful entrepreneur. She's disrupted multiple massive industries from like gluten-free food to female hygiene products, and is a wealth of knowledge, but also someone who spent half of her life for like 20 years in Montreal, Canada, where she grew up in a very multicultural setting, and then 20 years in the US, New York and Austin. And she has an interesting perspective on the differences between US and Canada. So please welcome Miki Agrawal.
I am born and raised in Montreal, Canada. My mother's from Japan, which is why my name is Miki. Miki in Japanese means 3 beautiful trees. And so my dad's from India, my mom's from Japan, and we're talking dot, not feather. It's, people say that all the time. I grew up in my first 20 years in Montreal and then moved to United States to go to Cornell University in upstate New York, and then moved to New York City. So I've been kind of on the America path and, since I was 20. And I grew up in a really, really multicultural neighborhood in Montreal, Canada, in the South Shore of Montreal, La Rive Sud, in a town called Brossard. And my neighbors were Chinese, my neighbors were Jewish, a friend with a turban, a friend with a hijab. I had friends from every walk of life in Montreal. So I grew up in just a really, really diverse, different perspective environment. It was really, really cool. And what's so amazing about growing up in Montreal is that 5 days a week, for 5 straight years, from grade 7 to grade 11, every single day, we had what you call moral and religious education, which means that you learn about every single morality, every single religion. So you're learning Taoism, Shintoism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. You're learning about every single religion, every type of culture, every type of morality. So by the time you graduate high school, you're just so accepting, which is why Canadians are like the most accepting people on the planet. Because when you wear a hijab, you're like, oh, I know why. Or if you're bowing, praying 5 times, like, oh, I know why. And if you're doing this, I know why. Like, I just understand it. And so what's so beautiful about Canada compared to the United States is that we always viewed Canada as a mosaic of cultures, which is like, when you think about mosaic, it's this like beautiful patterns of multicolors. Whereas in America, it's a very like a serious melting pot. And I actually saw the really distinct difference when I went to Cornell in the United States for college. We were able to actually see the stark difference between the pride of culture of being like a multicultural person versus the pride of being American. I met this girl who was this like exotic looking girl. I remember one of the first people I met at Cornell, and I was like, hi, wow, you're so beautiful. Where are you from? And she's like, Ohio. And I was like, no, but like, what's your like background? She's like, I'm American. And I was like, no, but like, what are your parents? And she's like, well, my dad's from India, but I'm American. And I was like, wow, like there was this like almost like shame vibe from her saying that she was half Indian, whereas I'm like shouting it from the rooftop. So we really grew up celebrating our cultures. Whereas going to United States, I really saw the celebration of being American.
That I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free.
When I graduated from college, I moved to New York City and became an investment banker. My dad was very proud. If you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer, then banker is okay. But so I just took the job because it was the highest paying offering, and I was still paying off student loans, and I, wanted to make as much money as possible. 10 days after I started my investment banking job, 9/11 happened. 700 people in my girlfriend's office died that day. It was the moment where I was like, wow, the mystery of life is you never know when it's going to end. It can end right now. A meteor could hit our planet, we're dead. I realized in that moment at 22 years old that like every moment needed to count. And I wasn't gonna waste one more day doing something I didn't love doing because I could end tomorrow. Coming from Canada and moving to the United States was a really interesting kind of juxtaposition of what business is like in both places. In Canada, it's still like hails to the queen, and it's still very structured, and like taxes are high. It's pretty it's social vibes, you know, like people don't love super wealthy, or entrepreneurship wasn't really a hugely promoted thing growing up. Whereas coming to the United States, I met so many entrepreneurs and I was like, what's an entrepreneur? You know, they're like, oh, you can start your own business. I'm like, you can? Like, I didn't even know that was a possibility until I moved to the United States. And so it was a stark difference for me between the land of opportunity that America presented versus more of a structured doctor, lawyer, investment banker, or consultant Canadian path that was very kind of one path. Also, like, I didn't see anyone getting invested in the same way they were getting invested in the United States. So like as an entrepreneur, the opportunity is like exponentially better in the United States than in Canada. One of the best parts of Canada is the nature, is the people, again, the tolerance of the people. It's just like kind, good, fun to be had there. Great education, great school systems, great hospital, medical systems. It's very like, much like Finland, you know? It's got this socialist element to it. Everyone's eating well and being under a roof and well educated and just taken care of. So it's got a really nice hug. And so for me to stay in the United States meant opportunity. Can only see myself as an entrepreneur. And so because of that, the only place that you can really thrive as an entrepreneur is the United States. One of the things I love about America are just the mentality of investing. I think like people are okay losing their money or swinging big and seeing their money 10, 50, 100x. And that mentality of money circulating, which is the way I think energy should be handled, is in circulation, versus Canada is much more cautious because so much money goes to taxes and you're left with much less. And so that money there's less to circulate. Versus the United States, it just has this mentality of more free-flowing commerce and circulation of energy, which allows for more ideas, more creativity, more art for humans to experience because of that circulation of energy. I mean, I think politics in both countries are pretty polarizing. Kind of Canadian socialism, it's a democracy, but it's still quite socialistic because of the taxation system. The taxes are so high. And I think because of that, a lot of people leave Canada to come to the United States and, you know, go overseas to basically build their businesses, their careers, what they're doing, because it just, again, when you're giving so much to the government, having the government handle the country's money, it just leaves less room for creativity. The one, I would say, challenging part of America has been the segregation of cultures because of again, America first, whereas in Canada, it's cultural, like first, and then Canadian. So because of that forward, backwards, it made a difference in how you presented. When you look at the stats, 2% of women are getting invested in, you know, so there's like real unfortunate actual numbers and stats that show women have such a small amount. And even if that small amount is given to us, investing in women actually shows women outperform men because we spend less, we're much more frugal, we're thoughtful because we don't get much investment. And therefore every dollar has to go super far. When you think about things, I raised $1.9 million and before we built it to 9 figures, so first 125 million. With Tushy, I've raised like $4 million before we took it to 220 million. We were able to squeeze the juice out of every single cent because we didn't really have an option because we couldn't raise more. I think it actually created the right conditions for creativity. I love constraints. I love creative constraints. Like, okay, we only have this amount of money. Let's get really creative. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've had such incredible viral success when it comes to PR, because, you know, most PR is free and we were able to be super creative because we didn't have a choice. My very, very first business at 24, 25 years old, trying to raise money for my first restaurant in New York, and I had no experience doing anything. Again, a lot of, you know, men in the United States, if they didn't have any experience doing anything, but then had a really good pitch, they could get funded. And then I was like, all right, how can I get creative in this conditioned society that we live in what can I do to raise money now without being like grumbling about it, being like, well, I'm a woman of color, you should invest in me. I'm like, no, let me just play by the rules of the game that's played right now. I brought in my white male British friend with a thick British accent to present my idea for me. And I borrowed my fancy friend's loft apartment in New York City. I had my friend who was a chef come and make the food. And I invited anyone who had any money in their pockets that I thought was like, had some money at all to this event. And I just basically said like, you've been handpicked to come to this meeting of the minds with the most interesting creative people, in New York City. So all 20 people RSVP'd yes. And when they came, instead of me presenting the idea, I had this British guy present the idea for me. And he was like, okay, this is why this idea is a brilliant, brilliant idea. And, why all of you should invest. And literally everyone invested. I was like, classic, but it worked. I believe women's marches, like there's a place for all the protests and the peaceful protests. Like I love that. But to me, the fastest way to change the game is to meet people where they are, change it. Like for example, for me, getting this white British guy to present my idea for me could be a cop out to a lot of people. But for me, I was like, I'm playing the game that we're in. Let me get this white British guy to present my idea for me. Let me build this business. Let me make the money. Once I make the money, I can invest in women. So actually thinking long-term, I've now invested in over 40 companies, of which 95% of them are at least one woman founder of the two. I love meritocracy. My father is super anti-affirmative action because he's an Indian man and he was an aeronautical engineer. And he basically was like, I don't want to hire anyone because of the color of their skin. He's like, I'm a brown man. I'm not going to hire someone because of the color of their skin or their gender. I want to hire people who are the best aeronautical engineers because we're flying millions of people on these planes across the world and we don't want them to be shit planes. So he would always fight with his seniors over that. And that only happened in the United States. In Canada, he was able to hire whoever he wanted because they deserved to be there. It didn't matter what color or whatever. And again, I understand the need for affirmative action in a lot of ways too, but there's a stark difference between Canada and the United States when it comes to meritocracy from my perspective. I think what Canadians can learn from Americans is just like increasing the scope of opportunity, because then you'll keep so many more people and it's so much more interesting because when you're increasing the scope of opportunity, you're increasing the scope of creativity, and human beings want to be creative until the day we die. The Canadians can learn from the Americans to just create a lot more room to be creative versus big government, low opportunity, not much investment energy flying around. Just create more circulating energy.
Okay, thank you, Miki. As you heard, there's a lot of stories. Miki is a wealth of knowledge and there's a lot of interesting things. But I guess as a summary, I would say I agree with what she said. When I was in Canada, I met the nicest people. I mean, if not the nicest people in the whole world, some of the nicest people in the world. The politeness is out of control. For example, when one of my friends from Europe visited me in Canada, he didn't have a phone and he was like, I need to call my friend to get a hold of me to get into our house. So he asked a stranger, he's like, hey, can I borrow your phone? And the stranger gave her mobile phone to my friend and said, I'm gonna go shop for groceries, I'll be back. And left him with the phone unattended. You would not do that in the US. So Canadians are amazing that way. It is also, I saw it in the university and the people who graduated from the university, that it's also a little bit of a brain drain. Some of the best talent and creative and most interesting people end up moving often to the US because of the political system, taxation system, but maybe mostly culturally a little more close-minded. Similar to Finland, it's not the best place for entrepreneurship, but it's an amazing place to work as an employee. Same way with the US and Canada. If you're just wanting to do a 9-to-5 job, Canada is amazing. If you wanna do something more meaningful on a global scale, US is probably better. Somewhat similar to Europe versus US is Canada versus US. I would say Canada is an amazing place to spend a holiday and travel and enjoy the nature. And US is probably in many ways a better place to build businesses and grow your career. If you like this content, hit the like and subscribe. And if you disagreed with anything Miki or I said, then just leave a comment below. We're not gonna be offended. And I hope to see you in one of my other videos that I've done before or coming soon near you. Thanks. Ciao, ciao.